His Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 1. That was Guruji, Vinaya said to Paramveer as she switched off her phone. What happened? Paramveer said, noting the stern look on her face. They got to Jai-Bhim, she said. Paramveer shook his head and looked towards the nightclub's tall metal doors, which opened up to reveal a group of men in white uniforms bearing a stretcher. A body lay covered on it, another victim of a tainted batch of 2CB. This time, a 19-year-old who was an only child. It doesn't look like we are winning, does it? Vinay said in a defeated tone, as she watched the body being loaded into an ambulance. It's darkest before dawn, Madam Ji, Paramveer said. Vinaya smirked. We are here to finish Miguel, or wound him so badly that he limps away and hides for a long time. That's the only end state now, she said. Paramveer's phone rang. Vinaya looked at the message from Guruji again as her second-in-command took his personal call. She didn't quite understand why she felt the need to pick at the scab on the permanent wound on her soul. The truth she had always known. She had successfully suppressed it for years, yet now it yearned to surge to the surface and bask in the light. I need to drive past my home and take care of some business, Paramveer said. Vinaya lifted her eyes to meet his, maintaining a silent, steadfast gaze. When the lingering glance got uncomfortable, Paramveer said, What's wrong, Madam Ji? You've always been like a father to me, since my family left me to deal with this cruel world on my own, she began. I'm always your humble servant, he said. Why are you? You've always known, haven't you? She asked. What are you talking about? Paramveer said. Guruji, she said. I don't, he said. Vinay raised her hand and said, I've always known in my heart, but I want you to know that you have meant so much more to me than that man ever will. The ambulance sirens wailed as if to underline the solemnity of the occasion. Paramveer sensed no trouble as he arrived at his residence on SK Road. He remained unsuspecting, even when his wife ignored his call and compelled him to use his key to enter the house. Diksha, Diksha, he called out. Only upon entering the living room and discovering his wife bound to a chair, circled by gunmen and balaclavas, did his heart leap into his throat. Alberto Salazar's voice echoed through the room. We have a task for you, and a no isn't an acceptable answer. What a disaster, Naz commented, observing Jai-Bhim's mummified body, streaked with red patches. Flies skittered across the grimy sheet, covered in hastily scrawled threats and warnings. The crowd in front of the commissioner's office had swelled in a matter of minutes, and the police were struggling to control the crowd. They made him suffer, Guruji said. Seems we'll meet the same fate unless we burn their whole establishment to the ground, Naz stated. Guruji growled unhappily. I have always known it wouldn't be easy, but this kind of escalation... You should tell her, just in case, Naz said. What are you talking about? Guruji asked. He tapped Naz's shoulder, indicating that they should exit the crowd. As they weaved through the dense crowd, Naz said, You should tell your daughter the truth. Guruji halted and turned to face her, even as the crowd pushed against them. He wasn't angry. He had a vacant look in his eyes, as if her statement had taken him to a faraway prison inside his soul. He turned and began making his way determinedly through the throng. I'm being serious. I doubt we are going to come out of this alive, and you will regret, Naz began saying, as they exited the gathering and walked towards their vehicle. The dead know no regrets, Guruji said. You don't know that, Naz said. Guruji's phone chimed. He pulled it out and examined the screen. Tell me it's good news. I badly need something to cheer me up after that depressing sight, Naz remarked. Vinitha thinks this is solid intel, passed on to her by the Intelligence Bureau, Guruji said cryptically. The suspense is killing me, Naz said, and I have a feeling you're being a tease on purpose. Guruji turned and flashed one of his rare smiles before saying, We have Miguel's location. Got to leave now so we can string up that bastard. Alberto Salazar's hands were drenched in blood, but he didn't bother washing them as he placed a call to his boss. Is it done? Miguel said. I think everyone who needs to take the bait will take the bait, Alberto replied. I can't wait to see your handiwork with my own eyes, Miguel said. Safe journey, boss, Alberto replied. Alberto clicked off the phone. He spent a few moments admiring the new marble tiles in Paramvir's bathroom before proceeding to wash his knives. The blood streaked down the blade, swiftly erased by the stream of hot water. His Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 2. Abhinav paced the balcony of his palatial residence in Rajputana Hills, not too far from where the departed Nilesh Chettiar once lived. A cocktail in hand, he contemplated the upcoming series of events with excitement. That dog Miguel should not have crossed me, he muttered. How dare he threaten my sister's life? It wasn't too hard to pry the location of the dreaded Dawn out of that stupid gun for hire, Alberto, and pass it on to the Intelligence Bureau via one of his moles. Abhinav downed the final drops of his cocktail and whooped at the sea located not too far from his home. The recent rains had flushed all the tannins from the nearby wetlands into the sea, turning it bloody red. He revelled in the thought that his cunning plan, akin to a crimson wave, would be the destructive force to drive the Mortifagos out for good. Once Guruji and his assistant put a bullet in Miguel's head, he would personally deal with the cartel boss's lapdogs, like that arrogant prick Antonio and musclehead Alberto. He would seek new partners in Europe to furnish him with the good stuff and continue on with his plan to be the king of Indraprastha. Abhinav stopped and commanded his secretary to bring him another cocktail. Extra shot of gin this time. The cocktail arrived, and he snatched it from the maid. He watched the stormy horizon in the distance and commented, King? No, I will be an emperor. The sedative in the drink began its treacherous work as soon as it hit his lips. Vinaya sat in the car, weeping as she considered sending Guruji the text. She had held back 1,000 times before crafting the message. Ultimately, a powerful and inexplicable force of nature guided her hand, compelling her to reveal the knowledge to a man she believed firmly deserved to hear it. She was uncertain of what she would achieve from this. All she understood was that this was the moment to unburden herself. The message waited for her thumb to press send. She sought forgiveness from the spirit of her parents for what she was about to do, especially her father, who she knew would be disappointed. The phone chimed. She exited the current screen where the message stared at her, weighing 1,000,000 tons. The photo gradually appeared as it downloaded onto the screen. Her mouth fell wide open in shock. She trembled, filled with an equal mix of anger and dread. The message under the bloodied image of Paramvir and his wife read, Come to these coordinates, alone. As Naz gunned the vehicle down the highway towards Miguel's location, Guruji studied the blueprints for Mine 87, which was at the southernmost end of the quarry. The quarry was an hour's drive out of Indraprastha city and was part of a mine that supplied valuable material that kept the construction sites in the city alive. It was also identified by intelligence as a site frequented by criminal elements to organize meetings amongst the hidden mine shafts, repurposed with modern amenities to cater to the vile clientele. So it came as no surprise that Miguel would attend the location to strengthen his local connections, now that Guruji and Naz had killed off most of his powerful foot soldiers. An unknown player with strong political connections had been supporting Miguel all along and had been instrumental in nailing Jai Bhim. But intelligence sources either lacked the knowledge or were purposely withholding information due to the unholy nature of the alliance. Naz's words, urging him to reveal the truth to his daughter, suddenly intruded upon his thoughts. What would Vinaya make of his confession? She would likely spit in his face, considering his words as an insult to her parents' memories. What benefit would such an emotional turmoil offer her already stressful life? The thoughts of his wife Ritu, who was now being looked after by a carer, thanks to the money he was being paid for secretly working for the police, also clawed at him. What would his sick wife make of this latest of many betrayals, as her body and mind deteriorated? One more insult for her to live through, merely months away from a permanent sleep. With a shake of his head, he pushed aside these troubling thoughts, focusing on the importance of the task at hand. Today, with a single decisive action, they had the chance to end the nightmare that the cartel had imposed on his beloved city. As for his personal misery, Guruji was not so sure. Vinaya sped through the traffic, heading towards the abandoned stadium that once hosted the Commonwealth Games athletic events, while weighing her options. Aware of the grim fate that had befallen other law enforcement officials, and those who had confronted the Mortifagos, she was certain that the cartel was intent on eliminating Paramveer and his wife in the most ruthless way possible. She nearly dialed her office a few times, but every time she tried, the face of a man who was like a father to her, covered in blood, graced her mind. For some reason, her mind flashed back to the day her parents died. Paramveer was the first to bring her the news. She remembered sinking into his protective hug as she broke into a million pieces. Since then, she had been rebuilding, and the man who was tied to that chair, bloodied and bruised, had helped her heal. There was an air of inevitability to her actions as the car wove through the streets she was assigned to protect. Clearly, she hadn't done a good enough job of protecting the city. If she could do one thing right and secure the release of the man who perhaps meant the most to her, she would feel blessed. She pressed her back into the car seat and took in a deep breath. She could see the disused stadium coming into view in the distance, its once beautiful facade ruined by cracked paint and grime. With tears streaming down her face, she deleted her office's phone number and pressed send on the carefully crafted message to Guruji. Abhinav's senses were so dulled by the effects of the drug that it took him a while to realize he was in the back seat of a car. His eyelids felt heavy, and he struggled to open them. Was this a nightmare? He wondered. Blurred and indistinct shapes passed by the windows of the vehicle, which seemed to be traveling through a tunnel of floodlights. The noise of the wheels on the road sounded like a thunderous waterfall. The driver's head resembled a blob of black gelatinous matter, expanding and contracting like a deep-sea creature propelling itself through the ocean depths. Abhinav managed to say before his swollen tongue gave up. The last memory he had was of sipping his cocktail, feeling as if he was on top of the world. The car suddenly jerked to a halt, and the doors opened. Spanish swear words drifted in, mingled with a cool breeze. This had to be a nightmare, he thought, as rough hands yanked him out of the vehicle. Where is he? Guruji growled at Naz as they scanned the insides of the bunker cut into the rocks. Naz shook her head with a worried look on her face. They emerged from the claustrophobic space into the open, greeted by a view of the mine that yawned like a gaping, cauterized wound. Distant explosions echoed from areas where work was still in progress. They spent nearly 2 hours prowling the original location, hoping to catch a glimpse of Miguel. When the promise failed to materialize, they began checking the bunkers in other parts of the quarry. I think this was a distraction, and we stupidly fell for it, Guruji said, kicking a rock into the depths of the opening. Shit, Naz said, looking dejected. Let's head back to the city. I have a bad feeling about this, Guruji said. And as soon as we have phone reception, I want to call Vinaya. Agreed, Naz said. Let's scoot. Guruji nervously cradled his phone as Naz drove out of the mine and onto Highway 61. Come on, he urged, watching the reception bars in the corner of the screen rise up one after another. Naz gave him a nervous glance. We'll handle it, regardless of whatever trick's been played. Eyes on the road, Guruji shouted, just as his phone chimed. He eagerly read the message. I have always known you're my father, the message from Vinaya read. His Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 3. You haven't gone to see your father, the man in the simple black cassock said. They now called him Pastor John, but he was once known by a different name. Ángel de la Muerte, the Angel of Death. His weather-beaten face featured patches of hair, surrounding scars as deep as canyons. His eyes were predatory, like those of an eagle scanning the desert for a snake. His stance on the steps of the ancient church exuded the same merciless authority he had once wielded, looming over those who found themselves at the wrong end of his gun barrel. Miguel, who was seated on the steps, watching the parched and barren land that extended for miles, occasionally broken by rebellious cacti that seemed malformed and cursed, did not respond. Tumbleweeds skittered across the baleful landscape. Dust devils appeared, danced in whirls, and dissipated as if they were conjurations summoned and dismissed by the hellspawn who held sway over this domain. A bat flapped against the dilapidated bell tower and seemed to draw him back to reality. I didn't, Miguel said eventually. While his enemies hunted for him like fools in India, Miguel had flown to Mexico for a spiritual consultation with Pastor John, a famed hitman turned priest who had once delivered death for the Mortifagos. Only a man drenched in the blood of their enemies, and then the blood of Christ, was qualified to listen to his confessions. The pastor's advice had kept him on the level since his mother's death, and he was the one he came to when the time called. I suppose you don't want to see him till the mission is accomplished, the pastor said. See, Miguel said. And I have no doubt you will. You were always destined for great things. The drug-addled, delirious boy who wandered into my chamber, wanting to end his life due to the grief of his mother's loss, is no more. What I see before me is the prince who will one day become a king, Pastor John said. Miguel turned and smiled at the pastor, who returned it. Miguel's phone began ringing. Come, it's time for your confession, the pastor said. First, I want you to see what I have done to my greatest enemy, Miguel said. Pastor John smiled coldly. The subdued bloodlust, now veiled by his outward religious calm, subtly emanated through the chill of his smile. The desire to kill sparkled in his eyes briefly. Miguel activated the video call and watched as Alberto Salazar forced Abhinav Pandey to face SP Vinaya Prasad. As the minutes ticked by, Vinaya felt the fear draining out of her body. She had accepted the inevitable. This lanky buffoon with shaky hands was going to end her life with a bullet. Abhinav Pandey, who would have thought? She always knew someone with influence in politics was supporting the cartel. but they had never managed to sniff out the rat. Alberto Salazar, the well-trained goon her warriors had not managed to capture, held the phone up to stream the event to some distant location. Even before Miguel's smug face illuminated the screen, she had a strong inkling his face would be on the other end. "I'm sorry that our first and final encounter unfolds under these circumstances, officer," Miguel remarked. "I am not," Vinaya said. "Abhinav here thought he would betray me by sending you and your hound dogs after me," Miguel said. "A shame, then, that I can think a few steps ahead of you fools. I am in Mexico." "A real shame," Vinaya said. "But don't you worry. They will come for you." "Oh, I will be flying back tonight. Can't wait to see your threats materialize. Let's be honest. What's going to happen is that this Guruji and Nas Q of yours will be dead in a matter of days. I'm going to bury all the troublemakers deep in the grounds of Indraprastha, starting with you," Miguel said. Abhinav started peeing his pants. "Puta madre, this is being filmed for the sake of our pets. Don't embarrass yourself," Alberto growled. "Mother Justice has a way of finding her way back to her feet. Killing me changes nothing," Vinaya retorted. "Let's test that theory, shall we?" "Shoot," Miguel instructed. Abhinav's wails were abruptly cut off when Alberto slapped the back of his head. "Do it!" the thug screamed. Abhinav's legs wobbled as the gun jerked around in his hands. "My patience is being tested. I am so glad I'm seated on the steps to the house of my lord," Miguel said. Alberto sighed and stood up and pressed himself against Abhinav's back. He then clasped his finger over Abhinav's on the trigger. He helped the hysterical puppet, shaking in his embrace, to lift the weapon higher. Vinaya experienced a happy memory of picnicking with her parents in Shivaji Park. Then the vast expanse of the city she loved and protected flashed through her mind as if in a drone flyby. Then she thought of Guruji and his steely gaze. There was a promise in it, as if he would set things right. Then her thoughts were ended by a bullet. A woman's mutilated, naked body hung from a bridge on the motorway that provided motorists access to the western suburbs of Indraprastha. Attached to it was a CD. On it was a label that read, "Happy Viewing." Tearfully, Guruji read Vinay's final message for what felt like the 1000th time. "I've always known you are my father." He lifted his gaze from the phone just as the ceremonial guard fired their rifles. From the shade of a cashew tree, he looked on as his daughter's body, encircled by police and dignitaries, was consumed by flames. The funeral was a lavish affair, with politicians and the force's top brass sparing no expense to demonstrate their deep appreciation for the fallen officer. Dignitaries made speeches on how it felt like one of their own family members had been killed, and how they were more determined than ever to quash the menace of the cartel. Guruji didn't believe a word of it. "Don't leave any of them alive," a voice said. Guruji turned to face the person intruding on his grief. S.I. Paramveer Singh, a shadow of his former self, stood behind him. Half of his face was covered in bandages. His right arm was in a sling. The once powerful lion had aged 100 years. Gone was the fierce fire in his eyes. "You should see what they did to my wife," he said. "Nothing will compare to what was done to my daughter," Guruji said. "I know I failed in my duty to protect her. It's on me. She was like a..." Paramveer didn't complete his sentence. Tears flowed freely from his exposed eye. "She knew in the end that you were..." he began. "I know," Guruji said. "Promise me you will finish them all," he begged. "What else is there left for me?" Guruji said. The encounter specialist stormed away from the tree, clutching his phone in a vice grip that threatened to smash it to bits. As the ceremonial guard fired once more, a gunshot sounded behind him simultaneously, its startling echo bringing Guruji to a standstill. He turned around and saw Paramveer's body slump to the floor, one hand still holding his service revolver. Guruji turned and walked away. David D'Souza, the head of the D'Souza crime family, sat in front of the tarot card reader, fingers pressed against his forehead, as if a headache was clawing at his brain. More of his men had been killed at the Easter markets in a drive-by shootout. His empire was running on fumes now, as the cartel pressed its boots into his throat for the final act. The room, draped in velvet and lit by the glow of antique lanterns, had not changed for the last 40 years. Wind chimes sang in the air. The scent of incense was familiar enough to offer him a quantum of comfort, even as he battled grief and anger. Divya, whose silver hair cascaded around her face like a waterfall, gazed at David sympathetically before running her hands down the purple silk robe that hugged her lean figure. She had been the D'Souza clan's spiritual guide for decades, and it pained her to see them in this condition. The custom card deck sat on the table like a Pandora's box. She had crafted them with her own hands. They featured unique symbols and illustrations she had gleaned from her shamanic dreamings. It had never led her or a client astray. In fact, she had always believed that it was David, not heeding her warning, that got the clan in this trouble with the cartel in the first place. Her finger adorned with rings snaked up to the table and picked a card from one of the 3 stacks of cards. She placed it flat on the desk. David removed his fingers from the sides of his forehead and eagerly studied it. Divya took in a deep breath and observed the image. A naked woman crowned with flowers, radiating pride and holding a chalice made of human bones. "The Queen," David said. "What does it mean?" Divya closed her eyes and meditated. David eagerly awaited her pronouncement. "What did she say?" Anthony, David D'Souza's driver/bodyguard/brains trust, inquired as they drove away from the spiritual advisor's abode in the black Mercedes. Anthony, with his thick glasses and long curly hair, looked like a skinny nerd preparing for IIT exams. He epitomized the saying that appearances can be deceiving. Anthony's capacity for ruthless violence and his connections within India's traditional crime syndicates had long been invaluable to the D'Souza crime family's success over the decades. His deadly skills and loyalty to David amidst the recent turmoil had kept the crime boss breathing. "She said a queen will come to raise us up from the graveyards," David said. "What does that mean?" Anthony asked. "Your guess is as good as mine," David said. That woman occasionally says something useful. Hope this is one of those occasions, Anthony remarked. She has never been wrong, David said curtly. She had predicted our plight. We got too greedy, ignored her warning, and let the snakes into our nest. There is a file next to you. Have a read. Something interesting is happening in Indraprastha city. 2 assassins have been taking on the cartel rather successfully. They were apparently used by the police force secretly, Anthony said. The press would have had a field day with that, David said. The public opinion is divided. People were fed up with the cartel's deeds. They liked that someone was looking out for them, taking out the trash, Anthony said. I came across something about some top cops being murdered there, David said. Yes, it's a bloody mess, Anthony said. By now, the assassins would have been disavowed. No politician would let that farce go on, David remarked as he opened the file. David stared in amazement at the sensitive information contained within those pages. Your ability to dig up classified information amazes me. I have my ways, and I know people, Anthony said with a smile as he navigated a porthole. David chuckled. I think we should reach out to these killers, Anthony said after a beat. And how do you propose we do that? David said. Like I said, I have my ways, Anthony said. His Night Begins. Season 5, Episode 4. Naz tossed and turned in her bed, her brow furrowed in distress. A haunting nightmare was unfolding in the dark theatre of her mind. She was standing on the bustling streets of a city that stretched upwards into the clouds, its skyscrapers piercing the sky. Above, the sky unfolded as a tumultuous canvas, painted with dark, swirling clouds that foretold an impending storm. Her heart clenched in terror as she spotted her long-dead lover, her beloved Justine, at the edge of one of the towering skyscrapers. She was not the rebellious youthful stunner that had made love to her under the stars. Justine's death-pale, sickly figure was silhouetted against the menacing sky. Naz screamed her name, but her voice was lost to the fury of the howling winds and the cacophony of the city. As she watched, paralyzed, Justine gazed down at Naz with a serene smile. Justine stepped off the edge and began her descent. Naz's scream was a silent echo in her own ears as she looked on in terror. The storm's ferocity intensified, whipping around them with a relentless force. Naz lunged forwards, arms outstretched. A thunderclap from hell rang in her ears. Arms extended, she positioned herself as a safety net for her beloved. Then the shakes arrived. Her hands trembled like leaves caught in the merciless grip of a gale. No, she screamed. Not now. The precarious barrier formed by her arms crumbled as the plummeting figure crashed into it. The ground rushed up to meet Justine, but just before the moment of impact, Naz Q woke up with a start, her body drenched in sweat, her breath ragged. Silence enveloped the room, but the vivid terror of the nightmare lingered. Naz reached out to the empty space beside her, aching for a presence that was no longer there. She whispered Justine's name into the night's silence, not in anticipation of an answer, but to seek solace from the strong sense of impending doom that squeezed at her heart. Guruji worked with the fervor of a man possessed to track down Miguel and his remaining band of killers. This meant pulling in old favors, shaking the right trees, greasing the appropriate hands, and when necessary, breaking bones. The last option was the least preferred one, but sometimes he was left with no choice. Like now, for example. He found himself staring at 4 goons holding various vehicle repair tools as Bapulal, the owner of the nefarious and eponymous body shop, sat on a charpai with a grin on his face. I know you have been loaning men to the cartel, and that your trucks have been moving their poisonous loads from Goa, which means you know how to reach them, Guruji said.
And why would I share the details of my clients who have brought me riches?
Bapu said before taking a long sip of his lassi. The white drink laced his impressive facial hair as he smiled. You and I go a long way, Bapu. We have always kept our interactions civil. I don't want to change that. I need this information to conduct some personal business, Guruji said.
Suppose I give you the information. Within a week, I'll be found dead. My body dangling from the rafters of this very shop. Even the renowned IP City police force has failed to push the cartel beyond the city's borders. How can you possibly shield me from such a relentless enemy? The choice was to either join them or die. I chose the sensible path. And now, instead of lying 6 feet under, I am reaping the rewards, Bapu said.
What makes you think you will have a different fate if you deny me? Guruji said, patting the pockets of his khaki trench coat.
Sure, you were a roaring tiger once, but now you are a toothless circus animal, and you will be treated as such,
Bapu said, stroking his long white beard. Guruji's smile was tinged with amusement, even as a tear streaked down his face. He hadn't completely succumbed to grief, nor had he forsaken it. Instead, a potent mix of pain and a thirst for vengeance coursed through his veins.
On second thoughts, sons, let's make sure our old friend doesn't make it out alive from the compound,
Bapu said. The men at the gates closed them off loudly, and Guruji could hear them being chained shut. The 4 goons in front of him dropped their tools and drew long machetes from behind their shirts, undoubtedly attached to the collars of their vests. As the tools hit the ground with a clatter, the keening sound of the machetes being unleashed filled the air. Guruji took off his Stetson hat and hung it on a makeshift metal rack reserved for tools. He ran a hand over his grey hair before pulling out his Vajramushti. The knuckle duster's metal, cold to the touch, thrummed with a frenzied thirst for blood. His rock-hard hands clamped around its lethal grooves and curves. Guruji depressed a tiny metal stud with his thumb, and a small blade flicked out of the side of the weapon, adding to its lethality. Now the cold-blooded killer could punch, slice, and stab at will and without mercy. His opponents laughed. The old predator ignored the mockery. He rolled his shoulder and rotated his wrists, preparing his body for the action about to unfold. Guruji, his pulse quickening, assessed the goons encircling him in the body shop that smelled of oil and metal. Each thug wielded a machete, their grips etched with notches and stained by their brutal history. Guruji's experienced eyes flicked from one opponent to another, trying to predict their movements before they even made them. The first attacker lunged, machete slicing through the air with a whistling sound. Guruji sidestepped, the blade narrowly missing him, and countered with a swift jab of the knuckle duster. It thudded against the thug's ribs, the crack of bone barely audible over the man's pained gasp. As Guruji pivoted to face his next attacker, he brushed against a stack of tires, sending a few rolling across the floor. Seizing the momentary distraction,
A second goon swung his blade. Guruji felt the air shift beside him, a telltale sign of the incoming attack. He twisted away at the last second. The offending blade grazed his coat, leaving a shallow cut. The thug, slightly larger and more aggressive than the others, resumed his attack with a series of heavy sweeping blows, each parried by Guruji with surgical punches to his opponent's wrists. However, his attacker's brute strength began to push Guruji back, his age briefly showing in his slowed responses. Guruji's breath grew heavier. He could feel the sting of a superficial cut on his arm and the beginnings of a bruise forming on his shoulder. "Remember what you're here for," his mind whispered. "Remember your daughter." He had fought to deny that voice for decades. Now it had free rein in the shadowed corridors of his mind. With a sudden burst of agility, Guruji feigned a misstep. As the lead thug overreached, expecting an easy strike, Guruji launched a counterattack. He drove the Vajramushti forward with practiced grace, the blade sinking into the attacker's shoulder. The remaining attackers hesitated, their initial bravado fading as they witnessed their leader falter. Guruji, seizing the moment, unleashed a flurry of strikes. He punched, sliced, and maneuvered with a relentless ferocity. The Vajramushti was a blur in his hands, its blade reflecting the shop's flickering lights as it found its marks. One of the thugs found his left cheek ripped in half, while the other had a bloody groove torn open across his chest. Guruji kicked one of the brutes straight into a wall, and when he bounced and returned with his arms flailing, the Vajramushti's hungry blade pierced the bottom of his jaw. Blood soared through the air, splattering against the metallic artifacts and the walls of the workshop, which echoed with the agonizing cries of Guruji's victims. The encounter specialist did not stop. He tripped his weakened opponents, their slamming bodies racing up a small dust cloud from the unswept floors. He relentlessly kicked them as they writhed on the ground, fracturing bones and marring their flesh with bruises. As the final goon succumbed to unconsciousness, the shop descended into silence, punctuated by Guruji's heavy breathing. He towered over the defeated men, the Vajramushti still gripped tightly in his hand. The old fighter's muscles relaxed slightly, but his eyes remained alert, ever watchful of any further threat. His gaze shifted to Bapulal, who watched in stunned silence, his earlier smugness replacing a dawning realization of Guruji's undiminished prowess. "Do you have answers for me now, Bapu?" Guruji said calmly. The color drained from Bapulal's face. He fumbled over his words as he hastily divulged the information sought by Guruji. The name and places spilled out in a rushed stream, each detail a crucial piece in the puzzle Guruji was determined to solve. As Guruji listened, his mind already strategized his next moves. When Bapulal was done, Guruji stepped over the still bodies and made his way to the exit. He paused at the door, turning to give Bapulal a final, meaningful look. "Remember," he said, "this stays between us. You've seen what I'm still capable of." With those final words, Guruji stepped out into the night, leaving behind the echoes of the battle. The night air was cool against his skin, a stark contrast to the heat of the fight. He could taste the metallic tang of blood in his mouth. As he walked away, melding into the shadows of the night, Guruji felt the weight of the days ahead on his shoulder. Guruji had just finished bandaging his wounds when he thought he heard Vrithu calling out to him. Since the carer had gone home, he immediately rushed to her side. Each rapid step sent waves of pain through his body.
echoes of his fierce clash with Bapulal's henchmen. The bedroom was steeped in a heavy silence, save for the faint hum of the old fan, its blades spinning warily. He watched her once vibrant face, now etched with the signs of suffering. Her eyes were closed. Maybe I imagined it, he thought. I heard about Vinaya on the news, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, just as he was turning to walk away. In her open eyes, there was a depth of emotion he hadn't seen in years. Murdered in cold blood. Such a cruel fate for a child. Her gaze met his, and in that moment there was a flicker of something akin to sympathy, understanding. The weight of his treachery pressed down on his heart. You always knew, didn't you? He said. She nodded slowly, a tear tracing a path down her right cheek. I always knew she was your daughter, and I resented you for it. He reached out tentatively, his hands hovering over hers. I'm so sorry, Ritu, for everything. You are the one I loved the most and heard the most in this life. You didn't deserve it. She looked away, her gaze falling on the peeling paint on the wall. I failed you, failed her, he said, his voice laced with regret. All these years, I've been trying to make things right, but it seems I've only been making them worse. She turned back to him, her expression softening. I know you tried. In your way. I thank you. It is I who must thank you, Guruji said. The room was filled with a heavy silence, the kind that comes after a storm, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unspoken words. I'm not going to insult you by asking for your forgiveness. There is no forgiveness for me in this life. So, if you will allow me, let me make your remaining days as good as they can be, Guruji said. Ritu clasped his hands and nodded, a faint smile gracing her lips. You are a killer. Murder is woven into the very fabric of your being, etched in your blood and bones. The people of the city are fortunate that your talents serve the cause of good. There's no shame in that, she said. Guruji wept, realizing that the only woman who truly understood him was soon to journey into the great unknown. And then, like the lone star in the night sky, he would be truly alone in an ocean of blackness. He knelt beside her, buried his face in her shoulder and wailed while she gently stroked his hair. For a while, she sang an indecipherable song in a frail voice, a love song from their younger days when he was courting her. Then she fell silent as sleep claimed her consciousness. Guruji was following an accountant tasked with managing the finances of the cartel's assassination operations within the city when his phone rang. This is the last time you will hear from us, a man's voice declared through the static-laden connection. We are severing ties with you and Naz. In the bustling noise of the city traffic, it took Guruji a moment to recognize the distinctive tone of the voice. Their anonymous informant from the Police Intelligence Bureau, who had consistently provided crucial details about the cartel's activities over the months, was a connection established by Vinaya. This was done under the covert financial and operational agreement set up to combat the cartel. The implication was unmistakable. Their financial lifeline was being withdrawn. No further intelligence or martial assistance would be forthcoming. The voice on the line hesitated for a second. "I'm doing this only because of my loyalty to Vinaya," he said to Guruji. "They know who you are, where you live. I recommend you go into hiding at once." As soon as the line went dead, Guruji rang Naz, who was operating closest to his wife's location. A muted hello came over the line, barely audible over the din of the motorcycle. "Naz, you need to get to Rithu right now. I'll be there soon," Guruji said, his voice tinged with panic. "Why? What's going on?" she asked. "We have been thrown to the wolves," he replied. Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 5. Naz had gunned the Ducati through the streets of Indraprastha like a speed junkie. But her efforts did not prevent the cartel goons from reaching her destination before her. She knew things had gone pear-shaped when she noticed a lookout at the base of the staircase leading to Guruji's residence. With a swift maneuver, Naz dismounted the motorcycle, propelling it towards the tattooed sentry. His eyes widened in shock, and he attempted to draw his weapon, only to be smashed by the hurtling bike. Drawing her gun, she sprinted towards the stairwell, bracing for a barrage of gunfire to rain down on her. She eyed the staircase to the third-floor apartment and spotted scores of thugs armed with bladed weapons who had transformed the route into a nightmarish gauntlet. "Damn it," she muttered, starting her ascent. Naz secured her gun in the shoulder holster and shrugged off her denim motorcycle jacket. She wielded the garment before her as a makeshift shield. Taking a deep breath, she embarked on the climb. The thugs, barring her way, brandished knives and machetes and hurled insults and threats as she advanced. These were local hires, mere foot soldiers for the cartel, equipped only with blades. For the moment, Naz favored her chances. She acknowledged the inevitability of confronting the cartel's elite enforcers. However, she would cross that bridge when she reached it. The stairwell was narrow, forcing the goons to come at her one or two at a time, a tactical advantage she intended to exploit fully. The first of the gundas came at her fast, wielding a rusted machete. Naz's response was instinctive. She yanked the blade free from his grip using her jacket and sent it clattering down the stairs. The goon, surprised and unarmed, barely had time to register his mistake before Naz delivered a punishing elbow to his solar plexus, which sent him sprawling. His accomplice, however, managed to slice Naz's jacket in half as she defended against a powerful blow. She threw the damaged fabric away, ducked underneath his second slash, and grabbed onto his left leg. She dragged him down and to the left, smashing his head against the wall and causing him to lose his balance. Soon, he was rolling down the stairs like a flailing doll. Two more goons appeared, one brandishing a makeshift club, the other a knife gleaming with malice. Naz dipped low, evading the club, feeling its whoosh above her head, only to be confronted by a slashing knife. She caught the knife wielder's wrist and redirected the stab away from her body. She then used her momentum to send him crashing into his club-wielding companion. A series of solid punches from Naz cracked their jaws and put them to sleep. A thug with surprising agility leapt down the stairs, swinging a chain with a weighted end. Naz ducked, feeling the wind from the chain swing. She kicked forward, her boot connected with his knee and crunched his cartilage. The goon's cry was cut short as Naz grabbed the chain, pulling him forward and off balance. She used his own momentum to hurl him down the stairs, where he landed with a terminal thud. Halfway to the third floor, Naz found her path blocked by a trio of goons, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. They had seen what she could do.
Yet they pressed on, driven by loyalty or fear for their employer's retribution. Naz fainted towards the first, a bluff that drew him forward, then sidestepped, driving her knee into his belly and pulling him down the stairs. She punched the second in his private parts and swept his weak legs from underneath him, sending him crashing face first into the floor. She heard his teeth shattering against the concrete. The third goon managed a swing with his bat, which Naz barely dodged. She retaliated with a swift jab to his throat, stifling his breath and his ability to fight. Breathing heavily, Naz pressed on. The final stretch to the third floor was the most harrowing. The goons, who had formed a barrier of bodies to stop her ascent, attacked in unison. A barrage of fists, feet, and weapons rained down on the professional killer. But Naz was undeterred. She moved through their attack with a grace fueled by the desperate need to reach Ritu before she came to harm. Her movements were a blur as she disarmed one and used his bat as a weapon against the others, breaking bones and smashing in noses. When the bat broke, she managed to twist a wrist and steal a machete which sliced open throats and guts. One thug wounded her arm with a blade, causing a sharp and sudden pain that forced her to drop the machete. Blood seeped down her arm and spilled onto the stairs. She gritted her teeth, using the pain to fuel her resolve. Roaring with fury, she pulled out her beloved hunting knife, which was strapped to the inside of her leg. Her remaining assailants echoed the primal scream and descended on her. Naz combined Muay Thai elbow strikes, delivered at close quarters with deadly knife skills, to leave a pile of bodies at her feet. As she neared the third floor, the two remaining sentries hesitated. Their brethren had underestimated this lone intruder and paid a heavy price for it. But they had no choice but to throw themselves at this deadly warrior. In a final act of defiance, the last two charged. Naz met them head on. She dodged a knife thrust, grabbed the arm wielding the blade, and broke it. The crack of bone was satisfying, and it painted a smile on her lips. She slammed his elbow, first into his nose and then his throat, effectively destroying his ability to breathe. Then she slammed her blade into the assailant's belly, finishing off the job. Naz successfully disarmed his companion with a vicious palm strike, but he managed to land a blow on the back of her head. She reeled for a few moments as he engaged her in a body lock from behind. Naz's wits flooded back, and she quickly dismantled his unsophisticated grip. She then twisted his arm, swung him around to the front of her, and kneed his jaw. With a swift teep kick, she sent the last goon tumbling down the stairs, leaving him dazed and incapacitated. Standing at the final set of stairs, Naz paused, catching her breath. Her clothes were torn, her body ached, and blood had turned her arms crimson. The staircase behind her was littered with the bodies of those who had underestimated her. But she knew the hardest fight was yet to come. Naz stepped over the threshold, ready to face whatever awaited her. Bullets pinged against the wall behind Naz, compelling her to dive for cover. She drew her gun, only to be besieged by tremors that gripped her hands. In a fleeting glance, she observed them quivering uncontrollably. "No, not now," she whispered desperately, as she executed a tactical roll and opened fire. Her shots veered off target, yet they were enough to drive the assailant, who was firing from the shadowy entrance of Guruji's apartment, back into hiding. Positioned on her back, with her gun still trembling in her hands, she aimed at the doorway. A split second stood between her and death. The gun barrel swayed erratically as she fought to steady her aim. Her breathing grew increasingly panicked. "Do not fail me," she mentally chastised her shaking hands. The cartel thug reappeared, unleashing a barrage of bullets towards her. One whistled past her head, another narrowly missed her leg. 3 rounds discharged from Naz's weapon in response to the aggression. One found its target, striking the assailant squarely in the head. "Thank you," she said bitterly. Another gunshot echoed from within the house. Naz leapt up from her position and pressed herself against the side of the doorway. "The deed is done. You are too late," declared the unmistakable voice of Alberto Salazar. She cautiously peered around, identifying him by his signature camouflage pants, only to be forced back by another bullet that whizzed past her head. "Oh, it's you. I was hoping for the old man," he sneered. "I'm enough for you, bastard," Naz countered, her voice laden with defiance. Alberto's response was a derisive laugh. "What have you done?" she demanded. "Come find out," he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. As Naz observed her trembling hands, she puzzled over the cause. Was it fear or unbridled anger? "I tortured the old woman before granting her mercy, and as always, I have recorded it for later. But why don't you come for a personal tour?" he proposed mockingly. Fueled by outrage, Naz dashed across the doorway, firing. Her bullet grazed Alberto's shoulder even as his return shot lit up her vision. A sharp pain exploded in her side as she fell to the ground and rolled away to escape further harm. She gasped for air, attempting to mitigate the pain's intensity. Alberto's footsteps approached steadily, his voice taunting her from the shadows. "You missed. I'm guessing I didn't." Suddenly, another set of footsteps thundered up the stairs, causing Alberto to pause. Guruji emerged, guns blazing. His attack sent fragments of the doorway flying as he charged, heedless of his own safety. Alberto fired back, but he missed. "Shit," he muttered. The onslaught of Guruji's retaliation forced him into a retreat. He sprinted down the corridor, barely avoiding the vengeful projectiles. He crashed through a window and leaped down onto a parked car. Alberto landed on the Toyota with a bone-jarring thud. He sprawled across the crumpled roof of the car, gasping for breath as pain radiated through his upper body. He knew he had done some serious damage to his shoulder. The cartel enforcer knew he had mere seconds to bail. He was truly pushing his luck. Guruji kept firing from above, while the hitman frantically made his way towards the gate. Guruji cursed, frustrated by his missed shots. His raging anger and concern for Ritu had compromised his aim. A car door slammed shut, and a Mahindra jeep roared to life, disappearing into the distance. Silence reclaimed the apartment. Struggling to her feet, Naz made her way inside, where Guruji stood by the entrance to a room, presumably where Ritu lay in dire straits. Each step brought reminders of the wounds that ravaged her body. Guruji stared into the room, his breath heavy and his shoulders heaving. Gathering her last reserves of strength, Naz steeled herself and looked. Ritu lay amidst blood and filth, her body decorated with countless knives arranged to form the shape of a skull. A gaping bullet wound formed a red bindi on her forehead. Guruji's voice broke as he instructed. "Leave now." I, Naz stuttered, her voice trailing off. "Go hide in a hole and lick your wounds. That's all you're good for." Guruji's words cut deep. A wave of anger washed over Naz, quickly giving way to a profound sense of failure. "I tried," she began. "Go!" Guruji's command echoed, leaving no room for protest. And with that, Naz withdrew, her spirit as wounded as her body.
This Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 6. Guruji stood solemnly at the edge of the churning ocean, a small urn clasped tightly in his weathered hands. Loss had silenced his mind as he prepared to bid farewell to Ritu. He felt numb within and immune to the chill in the air. The salty wind failed to sting his stoic eyes. He scattered her ashes into the restless waves, watching as they mingled with the sea. No words were said. He didn't shed tears as the remains of his beloved was carried away by the currents. He stood alone on that long stretch of beach, his steely gaze on the waters for what seemed like ages. Then something shifted. Suddenly, he was fighting a tide of traumatic memories that welled up in his mind. The morning had reached its end. Only the horrendous haunting images of Ritu's final resting state lingered, etched into the memory like scars upon the soul. All that blood, all the gaping wounds. Emotions roared back into Guruji's veins. He dropped the urn and clenched his fists. His solitude was soon interrupted by the approach of unfamiliar figures along the sandy shore. His gaze swept over them in an attempt to gauge their hidden motives. He remained composed as the posse drew nearer, prepared to face whatever fate had in store for him on this desolate stretch of beach. Naz sat alone at the dimly lit bar, nursing a glass of whiskey in a futile attempt to drown out her despair. The bar around her buzzed with laughter and conversation and the blaring sounds from a television, but she remained isolated in her misery. Mind was a whirlwind of regret and self-recrimination, replaying every moment of the failed mission that led to Ritu's tragic demise. The weight of guilt pressed down on her shoulders like a leaden cloak. The unregistered doctor had done an impressive job treating her bullet wound, and it had healed well. However, a persistent throb radiated from the injury, spreading a dull ache throughout her body. Taking refuge from hired killers while recuperating in a nondescript border town for several months was not her typical style. Then again, she found herself uncertain of what exactly defined her style these days. The utterance of the word Indraprastha drew her senses to the wall-mounted screen, which showcased the big font, garish spectacle of a breaking news broadcast. The central government had taken action, dispatching federal police forces to Indraprastha city to quell the unrest caused by the escalating cartel activities and the murder of law enforcement officials. "Too late to the party, guys," Naz scoffed. Suddenly, her peripheral vision sensed a familiar figure's movement at the bar. With a swift turn, she searched the surroundings, but found no one of interest. "I am starting to hallucinate," she said in disgust. Turning her focus to the amber liquid in her glass, she lifted it slowly to her lips. "No shakes now, eh?" she murmured, observing the steady ascent of her hand. "I hope you don't return when I place my gun barrel in my mouth in a few days' time," she said. Downing the fiery drink in one swift motion, she slammed the glass on the bar table and made her way out of the establishment. She scanned the crowd for anyone who might offer a bloody favor by ending her misery. But as she glanced around, she saw that everyone was resigned to their own grim fates, their expressions mirroring her own sense of despair and resignation. "These fuckers will do a half-assed job anyways. Better to seal my fate with my own hands,"
she mused. As she walked out of the door, someone dropped coins into the jukebox, and a somber song began to play. Its melancholic melody echoed her mood as she stepped out into the night. This is the perfect place, Naz thought, as she gazed at the expanse of the ocean from the cliff top. She let her mind drift back to the moments she had shared with Ghislaine, the love of her life. They had found solace in each other's arms, and their bond was forged in the fires of adversity. Then, Ghislaine was wrenched away by the cruel hands of fate. Here, during her final moments on this earth, Naz felt the weight of her absence more acutely than ever. She avoided any thoughts of her teacher and mentor, Virat Nariman. What would he say if he saw her committing this act of cowardice? Her hands and mind were no longer steady enough for this line of work. This was the closest she would come to atoning for her failures. Failures that had robbed Guruji of his beloved wife. Failures that had tainted the legacy of Virat Nariman. "I am coming to you, darling," Naz uttered as she remembered her final embrace with Ghislaine. The wind picked up, rustling the nearby foliage. She placed the handgun in her mouth. "You're getting sloppy. It wasn't hard to track you down," a familiar voice said. She placed the gun back in the holster and turned to see Guruji behind her, his expression a blend of compassion and mirth. "It was you at the bar last night?" she asked. Guruji nodded. "Guilty, as charged." "Have you come to give me another scolding? If you wait for a few moments, you can even spit on my dead body," Naz said. Guruji smiled sadly. "I have come to apologize," he said. "What for?" she asked. Guruji's eyes scanned the blue waters in the distance. Ritu was now part of that expanse, and he sought her in it every time he had a chance to be close to the sea. "It wasn't your fault. There is nothing you could have done to stop it. I shouldn't have. I was heartbroken, angry," he said. "Okay, now that you have apologized, can you leave me in peace to die?" Naz begged. "I have come to the best assassin in the world with an urgent job," Guruji said. "A contract? For me? Nah. I could do if it's a chicken, but anything else," Naz chuckled. "Then you're perfect for the job," he said. Guruji turned around and said, "Gentlemen." Two men she didn't recognize emerged from behind a tree. "This is David, and his right-hand man, Anthony," Guruji said. "The last few, making a stand for the D'Souza family against the cartel in Goa." Naz nodded at them, and they returned the gesture. "They want our help to bring down the cartel," Guruji said. "Our?" Naz inquired. "I can't do this without you," Guruji said. "I don't want to fail you again," she said. "You won't, because you never have. I don't think your hands will shake one bit when you kill Abhinav Pandey for me," Guruji said. Naz's eyes widened in surprise. "These gentlemen have provided me with Abhinav's location as a sweetener. While you carry out the mission, I will track down the cartel's hideaway in Goa. They've gone underground because of the heat from the central government. But I will find them," he said, "and I will wait for you to join me so we can take them down together." "And my men and I will back you up," David D'Souza said. "We will have our vengeance." Anthony smiled at this statement, the bloodlust in his eyes intensifying. Naz knew a stone-cold killer when she saw one. "He will come in handy for the final charge," she thought. "So tell me, Gurji said. Does that chambered bullet in your gun belong in your skull or Abhinav's? His Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 7. Harsh desert sun bore down mercilessly upon the isolated, luxurious Middle Eastern resort where Abhinav Pandey sought refuge. The booze and the opulence was exciting for the first 2 months, but now cabin fever was starting to grate away at his body and mind. The cartel had allowed him to live, but his connections with the nefarious scum were now exposed to the world thanks to some pesky journalists. Vinay's murder had unleashed a veritable hornet's nest, a storm of stings that took down major players and tarnished the reputation of his beloved father. By all accounts, he was now an utter failure, abandoned by family and friends. This was the opposite of where he envisioned himself when he first embarked on the treacherous relationship with the cartel to conquer Indraprastha city. He had left a trail of bodies in his wake, including Vinaya and her hired killers, during the Great Escape. At least he was still breathing. That was something to be thankful for. Today, driven by a restless spirit, he decided to venture out into the vast desert for a safari. 2 4-wheel drives manned by his bodyguards coasted behind his own vehicle, slicing through the endless sea of sand. Inside the cabin of his powerful machine, he tried to drown his shame by focusing on the stark beauty of the desert around him. He tried to practice a calming breathing technique he had recently learned from a podcast to control the panic welling up in his belly. It took him a solid half hour of driving and breathing before he gave up. He scanned the sea of sand around him and wondered what else might be waiting to kill him beside the vipers. Naz Q, clad in a combat suit dyed the color of the desert and perched on a desert spec KX3901 motocross bike, surveyed her prey from a high dune. She watched the convoy churning up sandy clouds in the distance as she got off the bike. Then she placed the suppressed Accuracy International AX308 sniper rifle in a desert tan finish mounted on a mini tripod on the bike's seat. She scoped her quarry through its powerful lens and waited like a deadly spider in a web of sand. A shot that pierced the driver's skull sent the first 4-wheel drive tumbling into a sandy grave. As the vehicle rolled down the dunes, the passengers were tossed around violently. Multiple shots butchered the occupants even as they descended to their final resting place. The guards in the second vehicle, alarmed by the fate of their compatriots, descended into panic. Amidst their chaos, multiple shots rang out, disabling their wheels. Despite the assault, the vehicle's bulletproof glass shielded the occupants from harm. Hakim, the driver of the vehicle, silently thanked his personal god for the added protection this vehicle offered, a safeguard the other had lacked. Abhinav's panicked voice crackled through their radios. The surviving guards informed him that their vehicle was disabled and that he should drive towards them in his beefed-up, highly protected vehicle immediately. "Come soon, sir. Together, we will deal with this invisible desert demon," Hakim said. "Shit. You morons are meant to protect me, not the other way around," Abhinav's voice screamed through their radio headsets. As Abhinav drove towards the disabled vehicle, seeking his help, it suddenly erupted into a massive ball of flames thanks to the precise hit from an RPG. The explosion sent debris flying in all directions. In an instant, the vehicle was reduced to a burning wreck, leaving no doubt about the deadly precision of their unseen assailants. Abhinav's panic turned to despair as he watched a plume of thick black smoke billowing into the sky from the smoldering wreckage.
His breath grew ragged as he realized the full extent of his perilous situation. He was alone in the desert with no one to help him. His eyes scanned the horizon for the predator stalking him. His mind raced, seeking resolutions. "I can't just sit here and wait to be picked off," he muttered to himself, determination hardening his voice. "I have to move fast." He glanced around at the vast empty desert, then back at his fortified vehicle. "This beast can handle it," he assured himself, taking a deep breath. "I'll zigzag through the dunes, making myself a harder target." With a resolute nod, he slammed his foot on the accelerator, the vehicle roaring to life as it sped forward. It swerved sharply to the left, then to the right, kicking up clouds of sand in its wake. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the vehicle as an RPG struck it with brutal force and toppled it onto its side. The impact sent a shockwave through its body. His head slammed against the steering wheel first, and then against the driver's side window. The once roaring engine was now silent. The sounds of the desert winds seeped in through the shattered windows. Abhinav's ears rang, and a searing pain shot through his side. Black smoke filled the inside of the structurally compromised vehicle. Struggling to breathe, his vision blurred, and darkness crept in from the corners. He fought to reel back his consciousness, which began abandoning him for the comfort of a sandy demise. As he drifted in and out of awareness, he felt the rough jolt of hands tugging him from the wreckage. Sand raked his skin as he was dragged across it. The journey sent fresh waves of agony through his battered body. A face hovered above him, indistinct and ghostly. He tried to focus, but his vision swam. "Abhinav Pandey?" Naz called out as she slapped him back to consciousness. He groaned, the sharp sting on his cheeks yanking him out of his stupor. His eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on the figure silhouetted against the desert sun. "Who are you?" he asked in a parched voice. "I am here to avenge the deaths of a beloved daughter and wife," Naz said. "You are one of the killers that I hired. The cartel failed to kill you," Abhinav said, before abruptly breaking into a fit of maniacal laughter. He paused occasionally to cough and splutter. Then he resumed his laughter with renewed vigor. "This ends here," Naz declared, as she produced a Desert Eagle from her holster and aimed it at his head. "My only regret is that I won't be here to see you butcher Miguel and his lackeys," Abhinav said, continuing to laugh like a hyena. Naz's shot rang out, crisp and final. She watched as the desert began to claim her quarry's blood. The crimson rivulets seeped into the sand, which drank the fluids up like a thirsty vampire. Guruji had been right. Her hand no longer trembled, and she felt it never would again. It was as if she had passed through a crucible over the past few months, leading up to this moment to exorcise a demon. Now she was calm, like a bomb. His Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 8. Miguel Beltran Fuentes leaned back in his leather chair, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. The large screen before him displayed a live feed from the CCTV cameras installed throughout his drug compound in Indraprastha city, which he viewed from the comfort of his palatial, well-protected home in Goa. He had spent months meticulously setting up the operation, ensuring every corner of the operation ran smoothly under his watchful eye.
"Look, Papa, it's set up right under the noses of these pendejo authorities. The fools in khaki are raiding places left, right and center, only to find empty cardboard boxes."
On the other end of the video call, Don Ernesto Fuentes appeared on the screen. his stern face framed by a luxuriously appointed study. The old man's eyes scanned the various feeds, noting the bustling activity of the workers sorting and packaging the addictive chemicals.
It is impressive, Miguel.
Don Ernesto responded in a cold tone.
You should be proud, Papa. I made this all possible, thanks to your blessings and guidance.
Miguel said, secretly hoping to elicit some form of approval from his father. Don Ernesto's face remained stoic.
You have done well, Miguel. But do not forget, complacency is the enemy of success.
The reaction irked Miguel. He was about to respond angrily when an on-screen commotion caught his eye. Uniformed police officers began to swarm the compound, their presence causing immediate chaos among the workers. The live feed displayed the swift and brutal efficiency of the raid.
Puta madre, pinches chotas!
He fumbled with the controls, trying to switch between camera angles to get a better view of the unfolding disaster. Don Ernesto's face darkened, disappointment etched into his features.
What is happening, Miguel? I have it under control, Papa.
Miguel stammered, panic evident in his voice. He watched helplessly as the officers arrested his men, shutting down the operation.
Control. This is a disaster!
Don Ernesto spat, his voice icy with disdain. Before Miguel could respond angrily, a loud explosion shook the walls of his sanctuary. The sound reverberated through the room, and the screen flickered.
What the hell was that?
Miguel shouted, rising from his chair. He glanced back at the screen, only to see Don Ernesto's expression turn from disappointment to contempt.
Adios, Miguel. I will leave you to scurry, as always.
Don Ernesto said, before abruptly ending the call. Miguel stood frozen. The crushing failure of his operations, the shock of the explosion, and the cutting disapproval of his father weighing on him like 1,000 bricks. Even the panicked urgings of his bodyguards, who had rushed into the room, were muted, drowned out by the temporary tinnitus that had overwhelmed his hearing. Outside, the trucks, fortified with reinforced steel and battering rams, relentlessly smashed into the outer gates. The gates, unable to withstand the onslaught, began to crumble under the relentless assault. A driverless petrol tanker, laden with fuel and explosives, was then sent crashing into a weak spot in the wall. The resulting explosion created a gaping opening, allowing for another front of attack. Inside the Benz vans, David D'Souza's men, along with their leader Anthony, steeled themselves for the impending battle. Anthony felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched his meticulously crafted plans, developed over weeks of reconnaissance and careful planning, come to fruition. Miguel's guards swiftly responded, gunfire erupting from various points within the compound. Anthony grinned as he surveyed the devastation before him. Time to show them what happens when they mess with the D'Souza family. Charge! He screamed into his phone. The breaches in the outer walls were now wide enough for the vans to drive through. Anthony's men wasted no time, speeding their vehicles into the heart of their enemy's stronghold, guns blazing. As his men emerged from the vehicles to confront their arch-enemies, Anthony barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. He directed his men to cover each other and advance through the ornate gardens surrounding Miguel's villa. The night was illuminated by the muzzle flashes of automatic weapons as the two groups exchanged fire. Antony's goons moved with military precision, taking down the guards with ruthless efficiency. However, many still fell to the hail of bullets from defensive positions that took full advantage of the complex's architectural features. As Miguel's men roared with joy at culling the first wave of attackers, they failed to notice how many of their own had succumbed to the assault. Their misplaced triumph was short-lived, however, as they watched another group of ants speed into the compound, bolstering the raiders' numbers. David and Anthony knew this would be their final chance to rid Goa of the cancer that was the cartel, and they had poured every last resource into this venture. Victory was imperative, and as their men advanced in coordinated waves, trying to overwhelm Miguel's defenders, it was clear that their unwavering belief in the mission was not completely misplaced. Anthony's rifle spat out rounds with deadly precision, each bullet finding its mark among Miguel's defenders.
Die, barbarians!
One of Miguel's guards screamed. He was crouched behind a marble statue, firing desperately at the advancing attackers. He managed to hit one of Antony's men, but was quickly gunned down by the leader of the Goan resistance. The defensive perimeter was falling, and fast. Antony's finger never left the trigger as he cleared the path through the courtyard. His men surged forward, their own weapons adding to the deadly symphony. Defenders crumpled where they stood, their bodies jerking violently with each hit. Blood sprayed across the pristine white walls of the villa and stained the once peaceful gardens. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the desperate screams of the wounded. As Antony's rifle clicked empty, he discarded it without hesitation, reaching for the long sickle strapped to his back. The curved blade gleamed under the compound's floodlights as he swung it with savage intensity. He ducked beneath a wild punch from a guard and brought the sickle up in a vicious arc, the blade slicing cleanly through flesh and bone. Blood sprayed, and the guard fell with a gurgling cry. Antony didn't stop to admire his handiwork. He was already moving to the next target, the sickle whistling through the air with deadly purpose. Each swing was precise, each cut delivered with lethal intent. His men followed suit, discarding their rifles as they ran dry and drawing a variety of bladed weapons. The air filled with the sounds of metal meeting flesh, grunts of exertion, and the screams of the wounded. One of Antony's lieutenants, a burly man named Joseph, wielded a machete with ruthless efficiency. He hacked through a defender's arm before driving the blade into his chest. Another of Antony's soldiers, a wiry man named Chaco, danced through the chaos with twin daggers, his movements fluid and deadly as he dispatched one enemy after another. Antony's assault was relentless, and his men matched his ferocity. Together, they carved a path of destruction, their enemies falling before them like wheat to the scythe. The defenders, realizing the futility of their situation, began to fall back, retreating toward the villa to regroup. They hastily formed a defensive line, their backs against the ornate doors of the grand hall. With a renewed sense of desperation, they fired back at Antony's advancing force, their bullets whizzing past the intruders and chipping away at the ornate pillars, stone walls, and marble statues. The sudden burst of disciplined, concentrated fire momentarily slowed Antony's men, forcing them to take cover behind the charred remnants of the trucks and debris scattered across the courtyard. Scores of them fell where they stood. Antony, his eyes blazing with determination, shouted orders to his squad. Recognizing the defenders' attempt to mount a deadly counterattack,
He signaled for his men to prepare their grenades. In a synchronized motion, a line of his soldiers pulled the pins and lobbed the explosives over their cover, sending them sailing through the air. The grenades landed amidst Miguel's men with devastating accuracy, detonating with thunderous blasts that shook the very foundations of the villa. Shrapnel tore through the defenders, screams of pain and fear echoing through the courtyard as bodies were flung aside like ragdolls. The defensive line wavered, and in that crucial moment, Antony's men seized the opportunity to press their advantage. They collected the automatic weapons dropped by Miguel's slain goons and unleashed a withering barrage of machine gun fire. The heavy rounds cut down the defenders who had survived the grenades. The relentless hail of bullets forced any remaining resistance to scatter or be annihilated. Antony's men surged forward, charging through the smoke and carnage, their battle cries resonating with grim determination. They breached the ornate doors of the villa, storming into the halls with blades and guns. Inside, the once grand interior became a new battleground as Antony's diminished forces pushed deeper, determined to root out every last one of Miguel's men and secure their victory. Under the cover of the chaos caused by Antony and his men, Guruji and Naz slipped into the compound, stealthily. The sounds of gunfire and explosions masked their approach, allowing them to navigate through the shadows undetected. Guruji wore his trademark white striped business shirt and grey pants, topped with a long khaki overcoat, his uniform of choice throughout his career as an encounter specialist. This distinctive attire had witnessed countless confrontations and takedowns, becoming synonymous with his ruthless efficiency as he butchered criminals in the line of duty. It was especially fitting today as they prepared to slay his arch-enemies, marking what he hoped would be the culmination of his bloody career. For this mission, Naz wore a form-fitting, black tactical jumpsuit made of lightweight, breathable material that allowed for ease of movement and stealth. It featured hidden pockets, where she concealed her Japanese tanto dagger and compact handgun. Her outfit was completed with a pair of sturdy black combat boots. Around her waist, she secured a sleek black leather belt equipped with various pouches for additional gear and ammunition. She wore fingerless gloves for better grip and tactile sensitivity. Strapped across her back in a specially designed sheath was a gleaming katana with a black lacquered scabbard and a traditional woven hilt. Guruji, his weathered face set with grim determination, glanced at Naz.
"It's time for us to split,"
he whispered, his voice barely audible above the din. Naz nodded, her expression momentarily shadowed by a cloud of sadness.
"There is no money in this for you anymore. No hope for your criminal records to be expunged. I will understand if you don't want to take part in further proceedings,"
Guruji said.
"Guruji, I thought you understood by now. This isn't about money or getting my record cleared. It's about legacy and revenge. This fight is personal."
Guruji smiled. "Your skills, your courage, they surpass anything your teacher could have hoped to pass on to you. We are both soldiers for life, trained in the art of killing, destined to fall on the battlefield. If today is that day, I want you to know how proud I am of you." Naz's eyes glistened with emotion, but she maintained her composure.
"We'll make sure Miguel pays for his crimes,"
she said. They paused for a brief moment, the gravity of their mission weighing heavily upon them. "Good luck," Guruji said.
"I will find you,"
Naz said. With a final lingering glance, They parted ways, each heading in opposite directions through the compound. Naz moved like a shadow through the compound. She rounded a corner and spotted a group of cartel goons rushing to reinforce the perimeter. With a swift, fluid motion, she unsheathed her sword, the blade keening as it left its scabbard. The first goon barely had time to register her presence before her sword severed his weapon arm at the elbow. He screamed in agony, but the sound was quickly silenced as Naz spun and drove the blade into his chest. She pulled it free with a practiced flick, sending a spray of blood onto the ground. Two more goons charged at her, guns raised. Naz slashed across the first attacker's midsection, spilling his entrails. She swept the legs out from under the second attacker and brought the blade down in a deadly arc, cleaving his skull. Alerted by the screams of the dying, more goons bearing bladed weapons appeared, and Naz met them with lethal efficiency. Their skills were outmatched by her masterful swordplay. One after another they fell, their bodies littering the ground in her wake. As she approached the main courtyard, a burly bearded goon blocked her path, wielding a machete with a menacing grin. He swung at her with brute strength, forcing Naz to duck and roll to the side to avoid the massive blade. She barely had time to recover before he charged again, hacking wildly. Naz parried a heavy blow, feeling the impact reverberate up her arm. She retaliated with a low sweeping cut to his thigh, but he managed to twist away, the blade grazing his leg. Roaring in anger, he lunged at her, and Naz narrowly avoided his attack by pivoting on her heel. The goon, undeterred by his injury, swung his machete in a wide arc, forcing Naz to backpedal rapidly. He pressed his advantage, striking with relentless power, each blow coming closer to breaking through her defenses. Naz deflected another heavy strike, but lost her footing, stumbling backward. The goon seized the moment, raising his machete for a fatal blow. With no time to think, Naz rolled to the side and slashed at his calf, causing him to howl in pain and drop to one knee. Seizing her chance, she lunged forward with all her might, driving her sword through his heart. The goon gasped, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the ground, finally defeated. Breathing heavily, but with unwavering focus, Naz pressed on. Miguel and Alberto were at the top of her kill list, and she was determined to find them. Guruji shared the same resolve, working tirelessly to track them down, ensuring they couldn't escape the compound. Their fate was sealed. Tonight, both men were destined to meet a grisly end, regardless of who found them first. 3 more goons emerged from a side building, their eyes wild with fear and anger. They spread out, attempting to flank her. Naz took a deep breath, her grip tightening on her sword. She charged the nearest goon, deflecting his wild swings with ease. She spun around him, slicing through his hamstring, and as he collapsed, she delivered a final blow to his neck. The other 2 goons hesitated, seeing their comrade fall so quickly. Naz used their hesitation to her advantage, lunging forward with a series of rapid strikes. She parried a desperate attack from the first goon and countered with a brutal slash across his chest, his blood spraying onto the wall behind him. The last goon, seeing the futility of fighting her, turned to run, but Naz was on him in an instant. She swept his legs out from under him and delivered a precise thrust to his eyes just as he hit the floor. She paused to catch her breath, surveying the carnage around her. Suddenly, a familiar menacing voice cut through the chaos.
Impresionante. Muy impresionante.
She turned to see Alberto Salazar, standing in front of a roaring Balinese lion sculpture, his eyes as cold and calculating, and his demeanor as ferocious as the beast. He was dressed in black military pants and a green tank top, which showcased his powerful physique. He rolled his left shoulder, a grimace of pain flashing across his face, before quickly twisting into a menacing sneer.
It's the end of the road for you, puta,
he hissed. Guruji moved through the shadows of the compound with the lethal grace that belied his age. He gripped his gun tightly, the weight of it familiar and comforting. The sounds of gunfire and explosions filled the air, masking his approach. The chaos caused by Antony's assault provided the perfect distraction. His destination was the garage at the back of the house, where their intel indicated Miguel would attempt his escape. The high walls and reinforced gates had thwarted any attempt at a rear entry. The only way to reach it was through the front entrance and then through the gardens on the left side of the house. He emerged from the cover of a large tree, spotting a group of cartel enforcers gathered near a makeshift barricade. They were focused on the perimeter, unaware of the silent predator approaching from behind. Guruji raised his gun, took a deep breath, and fired with deadly precision. The first goon dropped with a bullet to the back of his head, his body crumpling to the ground. The others spun around, eyes wide with shock, but Guruji was already moving. He fired twice more, each shot finding its mark. 2 more goons fell, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. The remaining attackers opened fire, but Guruji was a blur of motion. He darted behind a wall as the bullets chipped away at the concrete all around him. After what seemed like ages, the firing stopped. He peered around the edge, assessing the situation. 3 goons remained, and they were advancing cautiously, their guns trained on his position. As soon as they glanced his head, covering fire erupted in his direction. Guruji waited until they were close, then sprang from cover and rolled onto the floor before taking a knee. His first shot took out the lead goon, the bullet punching through his chest. The second goon swung his rifle around, but Guruji was faster. A mist of pink blood erupted from the back of the thug's head. The last goon fired in a panic, emptying his gun without hitting Guruji even once. Realizing his folly, he charged at Guruji with a knife in hand, desperation etched on his face. Guruji sidestepped a wild slash and delivered a punishing kick to the goon's knee, dropping him to the ground. Before the goon could recover, Guruji brought his foot down on his throat, ending the fight. Breathing heavily but focused, Guruji pressed on. He knew he had to reach the garage soon, before Miguel orchestrated a swift escape into the night. Time was running out, and every second counted. The gated entrance to the back section of the house, which featured the garage, was just ahead, but 2 goons stood in his way. Guruji fired, hitting one in the forehead. The goon staggered back and fell, while the other returned fire. Guruji dropped to one knee, squeezing off 2 quick shots. The first missed, but the second struck the surviving goon in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. As Guruji approached him, the man pulled a handgun from his belt. Guruji kicked it out of his hand and grabbed him by the collar, pulling him close.
Where is Miguel?
He demanded. The goon spat blood. defiant.
Go to hell!
Guruji's fist connected with the goon's jaw.
The goon's head lolled to the side.
Guruji dropped him and turned his attention to the half-open metal gate.
He was almost there. A sudden movement caught his eye. Another goon, hidden behind a pile of tires, raised a shotgun. Guruji dove to the side as the weapon roared, the blast tearing through the space he had just occupied. He rolled to his feet and fired twice, the shots striking the goon in the gut. The goon fell backward, the shotgun slipping from his grasp. Guruji stood and continued forward, his eyes scanning for any additional threats as he passed through the gate. He had just crossed a series of garden beds to reach the garage entrance faster when an unarmed hulking brute in a red vest and torn jeans stepped into view, blocking his path. The scarred thug cracked his knuckles as a cruel smile spread across his face. Guruji holstered his gun. "You're dead, old man," the muscled giant growled. Guruji's response was a swift punch to the goon's solar plexus. The brute grunted, but barely flinched. He swung a meaty fist at Guruji, who ducked under the blow and delivered a rapid series of punches to the goon's ribs. The animal staggered back, but recovered quickly, charging at Guruji like a bull. Guruji sidestepped and tripped the goon, sending him crashing into mulch. The brute roared in anger, turning to face Guruji with murder in his eyes. He swung again, and this time Guruji caught his arm, twisting it painfully and delivering a sharp elbow to the goon's face. Blood spurted from the man's nose, but he shrugged off the pain, using his free hand to grab Guruji by the throat. Guruji struggled for breath as the thug's grip tightened. Desperate, he brought his knee up into the attacker's groin. The brute's grip loosened, and Guruji seized the opportunity, delivering a powerful punch to the throat. The beast gasped and fell to his knees, clutching his neck. Guruji didn't waste any time. He grabbed his monstrously muscled opponent by the hair with one hand and pulled out his gun with the other. Then he slammed his gun into his mouth, shattering the Hulk's teeth. The bullet opened a hole in the back of the giant's head. He dropped the body and wiped the barrel of his gun on his pants. Guruji scanned his surroundings and spotted the rolling automatic shutters of the garage. His eyes blazed with a fierce, unyielding hatred as he stalked towards it.
His Night Begins, Season 5, Episode 9.
Time to die.
Alberto Salazar, the cartel's cruelest butcher, said, in a voice edged with arrogance. He unsheathed a long serrated knife and adopted a fighting stance. Even though he had an imposing figure, his left shoulder, still weak from his fall from Guruji's apartment window, hung slightly lower than the right. Naz took note of this weakness as she tightened her grip on her katana. They circled each other like angry predators before Alberto struck first. His knife sliced at Naz. She blocked his attack with her sword. She counterattacked with a flurry of precise strikes, but Alberto parried them all, his movements quick despite his size. The duel raged on, Alberto's raw power clashing with Naz's agility.
You're good,
Alberto said, sweat dripping from his brow.
but not good enough.
He feigned a left stab before swinging his knife in a wide arc. Naz pulled back, but the blade grazed her arm, drawing blood. She hissed, but didn't falter in her response. With a burst of speed, she delivered a powerful kick to his partially healed shoulder, which made him drop his knife. Pain distorted his features. Naz seized the moment, swinging her katana in a deadly arc. But Alberto, demonstrating unexpected agility, seized her sword hand and forcefully wrenched it aside. His immense strength crushed her grip, causing her katana to clatter to the floor. In one fluid motion, Naz drew her handgun from her thigh holster and fired, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating the room. Alberto knocked the gun from her hand with a swift strike, sending it skidding away. She aimed a punch at his injured shoulder, but he blocked it and countered with a kick to her midsection, sending her sprawling. Pain radiated through her ribs as she hit the ground. Alberto advanced, grinning.
Out of tricks already?
Guruji approached the garage's back door, his senses on high alert. The hum of an engine and the hurried voices of men inside told him Miguel was trying to escape. Guruji sprinted to an battered old jeep parked nearby. The keys were still in the ignition. He climbed in, started the engine, and backed up slightly. The large metal doors of the garage opened, revealing Miguel's sleek black sedan. Recognizing the vehicle from the surveillance photos, Guruji floored the gas pedal. The jeep roared as it barreled forward, slamming into the side of Miguel's car with a bone-jarring impact. Metal crumpled and glass shattered, the force of the collision sending both vehicles spinning. Determined to incapacitate Miguel's escape, Guruji threw the jeep into reverse, backed up, and rammed into the sedan again. He repeated the maneuver several times, each collision wrecking the luxury vehicle. The sedan's sleek frame buckled under the relentless assault, and Guruji felt a grim satisfaction as he saw smoke rising from the crumpled hood. With a grunt of effort, Guruji kicked open the door and stumbled out, gun in hand. As he approached the sedan, Guruji peered inside and saw the lifeless bodies of Miguel's driver and bodyguard slumped in their seats. The passenger door of the severely damaged car creaked open and Miguel stumbled out, coughing and spluttering. He wiped blood from a cut on his forehead, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and shock. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, all the rage and pain Guruji had bottled up surged to the surface. Miguel swiftly drew a gun from his holster. His face twisted in a snarl as he uttered, "You think you can stop me, old man?" They fired simultaneously, bullets whizzing past as they dived for cover behind the wreckage. Sparks flew as more shots ricocheted off the twisted metal. Guruji rolled behind a crumpled door, peering out to take aim, but Miguel had already shifted, firing from behind the smoking hood of his sedan. Both men moved with practiced precision as they shot at each other, ducking in and out of cover. Despite the barrage of gunfire, neither could land a shot. When Miguel's bullets ran out, he produced a gleaming knife from his belt. He had no choice but to close the distance before the old man put a round in his head. He leapt out of cover and charged at his nemesis. Guruji fired. Miguel darted to the side. The bullet missed him by inches. Guruji steadied his aim and targeted his arch-enemy's heart, but when he pulled the trigger, it clicked dry. He patted his coat to confirm his worst fear. He was out of bullets. The rampage through the compound had consumed more ammunition than he had anticipated.
Shit!
He cursed before tossing the empty weapon aside and readying himself for close combat. Naz's mind raced. She spotted her katana a few feet away and lunged for it. But Alberto grabbed her ankle, yanking her back. She twisted, kicking him in the chest with her free leg, forcing him to release her. Rolling to her feet, she barely had a moment to recover before Alberto was upon her again, this time wielding his knife. They grappled, each trying to gain the upper hand. Naz broke free, only to feel a searing pain as Alberto slashed across her chest. Blood seeped through her tactical jumpsuit. Naz spun and kicked the knife out of Alberto's hand, her speed shocking the ex-Special Forces soldier. She then landed a solid punch on his stunned face, which barely affected him. Alberto threw a powerful punch, but Naz ducked and countered with an elbow to his ribs. He grunted in pain, but immediately retaliated with a knee to her stomach, knocking the wind out of her. She stumbled back, gasping for breath. Seizing the advantage, Alberto grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the floor. Naz struggled, clawing at his hand. She then managed to bring her legs up, kicking him squarely in the chest, causing him to release his grip. Both fighters were now visibly exhausted, their movements slower but no less determined. Naz charged. She ducked a powerful left hook and leapt and latched onto the back of Alberto's neck with both hands. Pressing one knee against his sternum, she leapt up and crunched a powerful downward elbow strike into her opponent's injured shoulder. He howled in pain. Naz unleashed a flurry of punches and kicks, targeting his weak and wounded spots with precision. Alberto tried to defend himself, but his strength was waning. With a final desperate effort, he sprang at her, but Naz sidestepped and drove her knee into his crotch, sending him crashing to the floor. She reached for her boot, fingers closing around the hilt of her tanto dagger. She had one chance. Alberto surprised her by springing to his feet and lunged again. She sidestepped, pulling the tanto free. With all her might, she drove the blade into his injured shoulder. Alberto roared in pain as Naz twisted the tanto and pulled it out. Then she squatted and slashed at his hamstrings, cutting deep. He fell to his knees, agony and rage etched on his face.
This is for Ritu and Vinaya,
Naz declared. With one swift motion, she plunged the cold steel into his heart. Alberto's eyes widened in shock before the light faded from them, and his menacing aura dissipated as life ebbed from his body. Miguel lunged with his knife, slashing at Guruji's face. Guruji blocked with his forearm and countered with a punch to Miguel's ribs. But Miguel twisted and slashed a cut open on Guruji's shoulder. Guruji gritted his teeth against the pain, swinging his other fist into Miguel's jaw. The cartel leader staggered back, blood trickling from his mouth. With a roar, Miguel rushed forward again, his knife aiming for Guruji's throat. Guruji deflected the blade, but Miguel's next move was a swift slash across his opponent's eyes. Blinding pain seared through Guruji as he cried out and clutched his face. Darkness enveloped his right eye. Guruji staggered back as Miguel's laughter echoed in his ears. The cartel boss circled towards his opponent's blind side and slashed at his enemy's exposed flank. Guruji tried to defend himself, but his impaired vision left him vulnerable. Miguel struck again and again, each cut and stab opening up gaping wounds.
Muerto por mil cortadas.
Miguel screamed. Death by 1,000 cuts. Guruji sharpened his remaining senses, bracing himself for Miguel's inevitable finishing move. He listened intently to the criminal's footsteps, tracking his movements with his good eye as best as he could. He felt the air shift as Miguel sidestepped out of his line of vision and lunged forward. Guruji grabbed the Mexican's arm, pulling him into a brutal clinch. This allowed him to control the limb, wielding the blade using his armpit. Miguel struggled, attempting to stab wildly with his knife, but Guruji's grip was unbreakable. With a surge of strength, Guruji yanked Miguel's arm upwards, placing extreme pressure on his elbow and forcing the blade to fall away. He headbutted Miguel, then drove his knee into the Don's gut with brutal force before shoving him away. Miguel wheezed as he staggered backwards, blood flowing freely from his busted nose. Guruji's hand found the Vajra Mushti in his pocket. He rushed at the cartel boss, who had sent thousands to their gory deaths. He brought the weapon up and smashed it into Miguel's ribs, then again into his sternum. Miguel bent over and gasped, his breath coming in ragged bursts. Guruji swung the duster once more, connecting with Miguel's jaw, sending him reeling. Another strike landed on Miguel's neck, followed by a crushing blow to his collarbone. Each hit was delivered with untamed fury, breaking bones and shattering any remaining resistance. Guruji whispered harshly in his ear,
You took everything from the city. Everything from me. My wife Rithu. My daughter Vinaya.
Guruji drove the weapon into Miguel's chest, the impact reverberating through his entire body. Miguel's ribs shattered under the force, and he crumpled to the ground. Guruji stood over him, filled with the fire of hate. Guruji methodically moved from limb to limb, breaking bones. Miguel's screams mingled with the sound of splintering bone. Unsatisfied with the results, Guruji didn't stop until every bone in Miguel's body was fractured or shattered. Miguel's cries became weaker, his body broken and mangled. Guruji had just flicked out the blade hidden within the Vajra Mushti to plunge it into Miguel's heart, when a wave of lightheadedness overcame him. The old executioner, his body aching from the exertion, staggered back and fell. He lay on the cold, hard ground, his body battered and bleeding. Each labored breath was filled with pain, and he felt his strength ebbing away. The sounds of the gun battles in the distance had faded, replaced by the haunting moans of his enemy Miguel, who was still alive. Despair crept into his mind as he worried that David's men had been conquered, and Miguel might still find a way to escape. He cursed his failing body for the exhaustion that left him helpless in this critical moment. He tasted the coppery tang of blood in his mouth, and his vision blurred. This surely was the end. A failed encounter.
This is the series finale of His Night Begins.
Guruji groaned, struggling to rise. Desperation fueled his effort to push himself up and deliver a final death blow to Miguel. But his strength failed him, and he collapsed back to the ground. A familiar voice cut through the haze.
I'm here.
Naz said.
I told you I'll find you.
Guruji, feeling a surge of relief, smiled through his bloodied lips. He gently patted her cheek, leaving behind a crimson imprint.
I never break a promise.
Naz said tearfully. I know, Guruji said. Naz scanned his battered body with concern.
I'm all right.
Guruji lied. Naz smiled tearfully and nodded, her heart heavy with the painful realization that his time was running out.
I need you to help me execute a death sentence,
Guruji said. Naz nodded.
I saw a rope in the back of the SUV. Bring it to me.
Guruji instructed Naz. Once she had procured the rope, she helped Guruji to his feet. The act of rising sent waves of pain through his broken body. He had to pause before moving, groaning softly as he struggled to maintain his balance. Together, they staggered over to where Miguel lay, writhing in pain. His once defiant eyes now held a flicker of fear as he studied the approaching figures. "Let go of me," Guruji said to Naz, feeling a fresh surge of strength flooding his body, readying him to become a weapon of justice one final time.
"I can do this."
Guruji's grip tightened around Miguel's arm as Naz joined in, and together they yanked the injured cartel boss to his feet. Miguel struggled weakly, his strength sapped by the brutal fight with the encounter specialist. "We'll use that," Guruji said, nodding towards a sturdy tree nearby. They half-dragged, half-carried Miguel to the tree, his feeble attempts to resist almost pitiable now.
"Pass it to me,"
Guruji said. His hands shook slightly, but he steadied them as he took hold of the rope. Guruji looped the rope over a thick, strong branch, pulling it down to form a noose. The symbolism of the act was not lost on him. Another extrajudicial killing at his hands to rid the world of evil. He tightened the knot, ensuring it was secure. Naz slipped the noose over Miguel's head and tightened it around his neck. As Guruji and Naz completed their grim task, a group of men emerged from the shadows of the compound. For a brief moment, a flicker of fear crossed their faces, worried that the enemy had arrived to stop them from completing the righteous kill. Their fears were allayed when they saw Anthony at the head of the posse. David's lieutenant, bloodied but defiant, sported a proud look on his face. His men flanked him, their expressions a testament to the battles they had endured and the victory they had achieved. The compound, once a symbol of Miguel's power and terror, now lay in ruins, and its master was about to meet his demise. Miguel's eyes widened in panic as he realized there was no escape.
"Any final words?"
Guruji asked, his voice devoid of pity.
"My father will never forgive you for this."
Miguel growled.
"Then we'll string him up as well."
The grizzled warrior responded. Guruji took a step back and with Naz's help pulled the rope tight, lifting Miguel off the ground. His body thrashed for several moments, feet kicking desperately as he gasped for air. His eyes bulged in terror, and his hands clawed at the noose in a futile attempt to loosen its grip. Gradually, his struggles weakened, and a gurgling sound escaped his lips. Finally, his body went limp. Guruji and Naz held the rope for a while, watching Miguel's body sway gently in the breeze. Anthony and his men stood in silence, bearing witness to the grim scene as it unfolded.
"Put one between his eyes, just to be sure,"
Guruji growled. Anthony obliged. Guruji's shoulders slumped and he felt a profound sense of peace settling over him. Naz placed a comforting hand on Guruji's shoulder.
"It's over,"
she whispered. Guruji nodded. Then his legs gave way beneath him and he fell into the ground, his hands slipping from the rope. Miguel's body dropped heavily, hitting the earth with a dull thud. Guruji lay there, breathless and spent. Naz rushed to his side, her face etched with concern.
"I'm here,"
she said, kneeling beside him and gently cradling his head in her lap. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she took in the tragic sight. Guruji managed a faint smile, reaching up to touch her face.
"You did well, Naz."
Tears blurred her vision as she held him closer.
"I see them,"
Guruji said faintly.
"They are way..."
He never got to complete the sentence. Guruji's body went still in Naz's arms. A heavy silence hung in the air, thick and oppressive, before the night was shattered by Naz's sorrowful wails. Anthony raised his hand, signaling to his men. They aimed their guns skyward in unison. The sharp report of gunfire echoed through the trees as a tribute to the brave warrior. It was a ceremony reminiscent of a guard of honor for a fallen police officer. The first light of dawn bathed Indraprastha city in a golden hue. Naz stood on a hill overlooking the city, her eyes scanning the cityscape below. From this vantage point, she could see the entire city laid out before her, a patchwork of skyscrapers, business districts, suburban neighborhoods, factories, and slums. The quiet morning seemed to dispel the endemic chaos and bloodshed that graced its streets. Naz savored the cool breeze on her face, feeling it wash away the trauma of recent events. She was yanked out of the serene moment by the sound of footsteps approaching. Naz turned to see David D'Souza, Anthony and their men approaching her. David stopped a few feet from Naz, holding out a tarot card between his fingers. Naz took it from him and examined it closely. It was the Empress card, a symbol of power and authority.
Thanks to you and Guruji, I have my empire back. But sadly, I don't think I am the right person to carry the weight of the crown and the responsibilities of the throne. These men have seen my failures and suffered for it. They demand a better leader,
he said. Naz fixed a stern gaze on him, still uncertain of his true intentions.
Naz,
he said,
you have the skills and the leadership qualities. I want you to consider taking over our operations in Goa.
Naz looked at the card, then back at David with pursed lips.
I'm not sure, David,
she replied, her voice wavering. David's eyes narrowed slightly as he said,
we need someone strong and capable to lead us. You will make a difference to the lives of my people and those that depend on us. People who have been failed by the politicians and the institutions of justice.
Naz shook her head.
I've lost too much already.
Disappointment spread across David's features. Naz's gaze drifted to the trees lining the edge of the hill. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing among them, watching her.
It looked like Guruji,
his weathered face and stern eyes gazing at her with pride. She blinked, and the figure was gone, replaced by another shadowy form.
This time it was Virat Nariman,
her former mentor. Her heart ached with the weight of their absence. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to calm herself. When she opened them again, the figures were gone.
What are you trying to tell me?
She muttered. Naz turned back to the view of the city, her mind racing. Indraprastha was a place of turmoil, a city on the brink. But it was also a city of opportunities. This was the city both her mentors had loved and died to protect from those who sought to rip out its soul, even though they stood on opposite sides of the law. A surge of courage filled her veins. What better mission than to complete the journey Guruji and Virat had started? Somewhere in that hazy cityscape, another villain was waiting to rise and claim the city and its people. They might need a guardian who didn't wear khaki, someone who could go beyond the bounds of the law to stand up for them. She looked at David, a new determination in her eyes. "You know, David, there might be a better place to focus our efforts," she said, gesturing to the city below. "Why just focus on Goa? Why not expand? We could build something new here, something bigger and better."
David followed her gaze.
Considering her words. "Will you give me your men for this mission?" she said. David watched the city, the light of the rising sun casting a yellow glow over his face. Finally he said,
"They are yours to command."
The black and yellow cab wound its way through the bustling streets of
IP City,
a sprawling metropolis where gleaming skyscrapers stood in stark contrast to the shadowy underbelly teeming with crime. In the back seat, the man now known as Pastor John gazed out at the passing scenery with a grim smile. Miguel had been like a son to him, a protege he had tried to mold in his image. He thought back to his last conversation with Miguel, the young man's ambition and hunger for power. Pastor John had believed in him, had seen the potential for greatness. That great flame, that great hope, had been extinguished by their wretched enemies. The news of his demise had stirred immense grief, the need for vengeance, and something primal, something he could not name at first. After several weeks, he found clarity. He realized how much he missed the adrenaline rush of dispensing death. The priestly robes he now wore felt like a costume, a disguise that no longer suited him. The tools of his trade called to him like old friends. Presently, he turned his attention to the streets which bustled with activity. He could sense the simmering tension beneath the normal flow of human activity, the latent violence. Crime was rampant here, an ever-present force that powered the city's undercurrents. It was a perfect playground to quench his bloodthirst. John had not come to Indraprastha merely to fulfill the instructions of Miguel's father, the Don. He had come to reclaim his legacy, to once again become the Angel of Death.
And maybe, just maybe, it might be a place to craft his own criminal empire.
The cab turned onto a narrower street, lined with dilapidated buildings covered in graffiti, each one telling a story of neglect and desperation. It finally pulled up to an unremarkable building. John paid the driver and stepped out, inhaling the air that smelled of exhaust and decay. As he walked towards the hideout, he relished the thought of the chaos he would unleash on this city, the battles he would fight against his enemies, the masterpiece of blood and terror he would paint on its walls.
With each step, the Angel de la Muerte felt like his old self was returning.
Pastor John would once again become the harbinger of death in this city of eternal darkness. He wondered who would dare to oppose him, who would rise to meet him in battle.